Go. Streaming data free on the MTN network in South Africa.
This is Omni Sports.
T's and C's apply.
The biggest match in world rugby is upon us again. Last week was a titanic battle in Johannesburg. This week promises to be no different in Cape Town. Battle lines have been drawn. The generals have drawn up their strategies and positioned their troops. Now it's time to do battle. Brendan Null joins us to discuss the Springboks taking on the All Blacks. Rugby journalist and podcast host Brendan Null. Let's start with this, Brendan. Was Rassie really waiting to see if Sia was okay, or was he playing silly buggers a little bit with the All Blacks and waiting, sort of playing those mental games?
Well, with Rassie, you never morning, guys. With Rassie, you never really know. Yeah, that's the thing with him. I think there was probably a little bit of a manner of sort of, okay, let's keep them guessing a little bit. But I think at the bottom line is, I think you see how important Sia is to this team, that they'll wait for him to be ready. I think he was ready. They make those decisions on a Monday. I think it's really just, sort of playing around with us a bit and keeping us guessing a bit.
How serious is Sia's injury?
Well, it's quite interesting. A rather strange interaction you say with Rassie. You're saying basically it's a nose fracture, not a cheek fracture, as we all thought. And the bottom line is, and I mean, to put it quite bluntly, it can't get more broken. So the whole thing was going to be, can Sia go into a tackle and will he hesitate? And they feel that he hasn't sort of been holding back. So Rassie said he might come out looking like Quagga Smith afterwards, but he's ready to play.
You love to hear it. Let's move to the pivot position. Handre is in for Sasha. Is that to do with the 30 kilometer wins in Cape Town, or were we expecting this?
No, I think we also were a bit surprised about that. I mean, I suppose it shows you where the side is at the moment, that when somebody with a 70-odd tests like Handre's got, when he gets selected, it's considered a bit of a surprise. I think the whole sort of team makeup just shows that they want to shut the series down. They want to end the rugby championship sort of race here in Cape Town, and they want to strike a blow against the All Blacks and beat them for the fourth time in a row. So, there's that's sort of the seriousness that, as Rassie said in the press conference, there's days where you want to sort of give guys goes in on the field, and then there's days that you really want to just revert to type and play the team that you feel is going to beat the All Blacks. And I think this is probably the latter.
So that's my question. What is your take then on the team and the changes? You've given us most of that, but I mean, Grant Williams in Lacagna, Willie Leroux. That's obviously wanting to keep the game tight and composed.
Yeah, I think I think there was some frailties exposed last week. The All Blacks did sort of expose a few of the things with the younger players in the Bok team that they exploited, and I think really they felt their attack wasn't at where it should be, and really obviously brings that and gives that sort of option that keeps the opposition guessing as well. And I think other than that, it's basically reverted to the same team that won, more or less, that won the World Cup final, the majority of them. And limited guys, they feel Grant Williams has done so well off the bench and brought so much speed to their play that he deserves a spot. And I agree with Rassie there. I mean, we've been waiting for Grant to get his start for a while now. But other than that, it's literally probably the most senior, most experienced, the most trusted group of players.
To think that Spicy Plum is he's obviously got the injury, hey?
He'll be playing for Western Province this weekend, I think, again. So he's coming back from injury. Yeah.
Brennan, on the socials, these young people don't say social media anymore. On the socials, you got to say socials, and you don't say Instagram. You say Insta. The kids say, "What a time to be alive!" When we can rotate, arguably the best. I would argue for him in the last 5 years to say Spicy Plum has been the best loose head in the world. When we can just rotate him, it's like, okay, you go take some time off with your injury, play for Province, and still be favourites. What a time to be alive, as the kids say.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing you're going to give Rassie and them a lot of credit for. I mean, other than winning 2 World Cups, because that goes without saying, but they've got SA Rugby almost into a position where there's, in any position that you look in, there's 3 guys there's one senior guy saying fullback like Willie Leroux, and then there's an upper Lele Fassi coming through, and then there's a youngster like Keon Horn who's starting to make his appearance. And you go through every single position on the box side, and you could easily take 50 players and play them any combination of that at any time. And the key is now, before the next World Cup, to get those youngsters up to about 40, 50 caps and going with that sort of mix into the next World Cup. But that's the plan. It all works well while you're winning, and at the moment it's working very well for them.
Yeah, I want to get back to Grant Williams. I mean, I've been calling for him to start as well for a long time. I want your take on him, but also I think that this may spell the end for Faf de Klerk. Kobus Reinach, Grant Williams, Jaden Hendrickse. Faf de Klerk's going to struggle to break into that team.
Well, I think we're going to see that not just on him. We're going to see it on a couple of guys like Mani Libbok's probably going to struggle a bit. There's a couple of other guys who are also going to probably start struggling in the next couple of years. But I think what they're doing is quite clever because a guy like Faf is now in his early 30s. He's going to struggle to make another World Cup if he plays every test. So they're trying to, by playing the younger guys, they're giving him a bit more time on his career. And look, that's experience you don't throw away. So they'll keep it around as long as they can, as long as it's useful for the Springboks. But I agree. I think in Tony Brown's game plan, Kobus Reinach has been great because he plays a very fast game off the base, and Grant's the same. And those are the type of scrum halves who are going to come more and more into the reckoning over the next couple of years. And I think guys like Jaden Hendrickse and Faf who've got great kicking games, but the Boks don't rely on their kicking game as much as they used to. So they're definitely going to have to adapt a bit, or they're going to find themselves struggling to make the team.
On the line, Brendan Null talking to us about the fortunes of New Zealand against the All Blacks tomorrow, round 2 in the Rugby Championship. This time they play in Cape Town, having played in Johannesburg last week. Let's move over to the All Blacks. Your take on the New Zealand team: Beauden Barrett to the bench, Jordan to 15, Ratima to start at 9. Are they looking to speed up the game, or what's the game plan there with Razor?
Well, I think they've had some injuries as well. So, they've had to make 1 or 2 changes. They would have probably played Caleb Clark again. But, the 2 wings that they've got now are 2 wings that have succeeded against South Africa in the past. Sever Reece and Mark Talea. They're both exceptional players and got a great strike rates. And Will Jordan has got probably one of the best strike rates in world rugby. So they've reverted to a sort of more attacking back 3. But I think their biggest thing is going to be how they're going to control the game, because Will Jordan's more wing than he is a fullback, and Cortez Ratima has only got 5 tests. So those are places the Boks can probably put some pressure on them. But still, it's a very good team. It's an exceptional team. This Wallace Setiti, who came in for Ethan Blackadder, is a big piece of meat. He's 120 odd kgs. He's 6 foot, I don't know, 6 foot whatever. But I stood next to him the other day, and you really feel like a small dwarf compared to some of these guys. And they're certainly looking to bulk up a bit, but I don't know. I think the whole thing comes with the All Blacks. You've got to shut down their attack as quickly as possible, and that's the key for the Boks, is making sure that you shut them down. The All Blacks traditionally score 30-odd points per game, so basically the Boks' outlook has always been, we've got to score more.
You spoke about Rassie building that base of 50 players, is what he said he wants to build for the next World Cup. It's amazing to me how the All Blacks failed to see beyond their previous great era. It seems to be like they've completely washed out a whole generation, and you're seeing now they're having to rebuild the whole thing instead of doing what they previously used to do, sort of stack on that success. It's been quite surprising, Brendan, hasn't it, to see how poorly planned this transition was?
Yeah, in a way it has. New Zealand's had their own sort of problems with players leaving and sort of the clubs starting to overseas clubs taking these players away. But that's where the key is. When they had a team like from 2015 to 2011 to 2015 where they won back-to-back World Cups. There's just that tendency at time for coaches to play guys just that game or two too long, and it's a bit of a puzzle for the coaches to build. But sometimes you get it wrong, and what New Zealand had at that stage, Kevin will remember as well. We covered many of those tests. Yeah. They could field 2 different teams, and often did against teams, and they would be just as potent. I don't think they've got that sort of depth. I think part of that was the way they've managed their players. Part of that's probably been because we've left Super Rugby, that they don't have that physicality anymore on a weekly basis. So they've struggled with that, and I feel for Scott Robertson because he's been seen as a saviour of New Zealand rugby, and he's a great provincial coach. Won 7 Super Rugby titles with the Crusaders, but international rugby is very different. You get your players for 5-6 days before a test. There's no sort of long-term like as in provincial rugby where you can work for the pre-season and months with guys before you play a game. this is literally you thrown in at the deep end. And I think there are some structural problems in New Zealand rugby that he's going to have to deal with at some point. But he is a good coach, and they always have ounces of talent. Whether they have enough to go through the dark times is what the big question for them will be.
In the words of the great Jose Mourinho, right? He said, "No eggs, no omelette." And he said, even if you have eggs, the quality of the eggs will determine the quality of the omelette. Scott Robertson is going to learn that now.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, I was going to say it is the thing, and I think they're realizing more and more, and that's why we're seeing talk of tours and more contact between New Zealand and South Africa at the moment, because they're realizing that by dominating Australia in Super Rugby, it's not really helping their rugby, and they don't get that physicality and that weekly, sort of dose of South African forwards that they have to face, and those challenges that are very different to what you see in Super Rugby at the moment. So I think that they've got a lot of challenges there. New Zealand rugby also. Teams have also they don't have that influx of island players anymore, although, they basically hollowed out the islands already. The island players have got quite clever in the nations there, because they're starting to get those older All Blacks playing for Tonga and Samoa and Fiji. And now there's not such a big draw card to play for the All Blacks anymore. So, all those little things, it's all little things that have an influence on them long term, and at some point you still realize, oh dear, we haven't done the right thing. But they're still a great nation. They're still very proud, and as we saw last week, that even when the Boks do dominate, they can still turn your mistakes into points very easily.
Yeah, calm as a bitch. I mean, they kicked us out of Super Rugby, so terrible for them. Ethan Blackadder's obviously, he was immense last week. Now, how much do you think the All Blacks are going to miss him?
Well, I think they are. Because he was everywhere last week. He was certainly one of those players that stopped and forced a couple of mistakes from the Springboks a couple of times last week. There's Wallace Atiti, they really rate him. But, it's a different thing. One thing that Ethan does is obviously he's very physical and is in the box face. But the other thing he does, he sort of creates space for people like Ardie Savea to do his magic. And you want to see Ardie Savea with the ball and in a bit of space, and not doing sort of the hard yards, because Ardie's at his best, when he has some freedom on the field as such. That's a big task for this youngster. He's played 3 or 4 tests now, so they expect a lot of it from him. But that's an area the Boks can exploit.
Yeah, if the Boks went at their absolute best last week, I think JW could see the rugby writer said they're probably about 60%. So what do you think they need to, what do you know that they need to do better and improve upon from last week to ensure this week's victory, basically, and the rugby championship title just about?
Well, if you look at last week, the first thing I think Rusty would say is that 2 of those tries, the one came from a turnover where the Boks defence, Cheslin shot out and I think Jesse shot out, and they couldn't cover the turnover ball very quickly, and the All Blacks scored from that. The other one was an intercept try. So those are 2 things where they can say, look, just cut down and be a bit more patient. Get the passes in the right areas, and that already would make a difference. I think the thing with them is what I saw last week, which was very good for me, is that they didn't panic when they went 10 points down. We've all watched Springbok teams that have sort of disintegrated, and especially when you've got young players playing sort of like Sasha and those guys, who've had a handful of tests. When those guys sort of panic a little bit, and it's natural for a young player in that sort of pressure environment. They didn't panic. They came back, and I think there was 5 of those guys who played the All Blacks for the first time who were on the field when they made that comeback. So, there's going to be a lot more composure there, and there's definitely this time it's a bit of a test for the Boks with these older guys, because they have these younger guys nipping at their heels the whole time. They know they've got to prove themselves. They know these players are going to take their place. So I'm hoping the Boks obviously put in a much more composed performance and take their chances. Last week they dominated the physical collisions, but they had so many knock-ons and so many, sort of almost curtly kicking the ball through. There's a number of those incidents that they didn't finish off, and against the All Blacks, unfortunately, you have to take those chances or they're going to punish you. You do have to take those chances or they will punish you. Well said, Brendan. Brendan, where can people find your writing, and where can we listen to your podcast? What's it called? The podcast I do with a good friend of Kevin and mine, DM.com, it's called To The Last Drop. It's partly rugby, and as the name suggests, it's also partly something cold in the glass at the end of the day. So we do that on wherever you find your podcasts. I also have a YouTube channel under my name, which I do a lot of the stuff on, and I also write for Supersport.com. Supersport.com. You can find To The Last Drop wherever you get your podcasts. Brendan Null, that is BrenenDaln No,
N-E-L.
D-E-N.
D-E-N, excuse me. So it's Brendenel. Brendan Null, rugby journalist, podcast host to The Last Drop. You can find Brendan wherever you get your podcast, and he's got a YouTube channel. Brendan, appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much, brother. We will
Anytime, guys.
Thanks so much. It's senseless. It's a travesty. Why is this happening? She is gone too soon. We will discuss the Cheptegei travesty on the other side. 60 seconds.
Let's go. Streaming data free on the MTM network in South Africa.
This is Omni Sports.
T's and C's apply.